For this stage, we're going to be creating some complex selections and doing some fancy editing to each of the layers. To get started, I'm going to turn off visibility for my logo types layers and make sure my sunrise layer is selected. On this sunrise layer, I want to isolate just my figure and the ground plane that she's sitting on. I want to get rid of the skyline and the water that she's looking at. And in order to do this, I want to turn on what's called a layer mask. Now, to make this easier to select and to edit, I'm going to use the Quick Selection tool. This tool is located underneath your lasso tool, and if you don't see it, it may be nested underneath the Magic Wand tool. Now, since my figure is nice and dark, she's got a good contrast with the light background. I can use this to my advantage by using the Quick Selection tool. I'm going to click on the rock down at the bottom left-hand corner, and when I start to drag, Photoshop is going to automatically recognize the edges between the dark figure and the light background, and so it very quickly makes this selection. Now, it's not a perfect selection. There's parts of her that haven't been selected, mainly the little wispy small hairs that are around her head, and also some of the sticks that are on the bottom left-hand corner next to the figure. So to edit my selection, look at the very top center of your control panel and click on the Select and Mask options. This is going to bring you into mask editing mode. This is a different kind of editor, and if you look on the right-hand side under the Properties, make sure you're viewing this in onion skin mode, and your transparency is set to about 50%. This will allow you to see exactly what we're keeping at 100%, and everything else will be dimmed down. Now, if I hit Command and the plus sign, I can zoom in, and let's go to where we can see her head. We want to be able to add on all these little fine hairs that you can see that are being masked out right now. In order to do this, go to the left-hand side and choose this second tool called the Refine Edge Brush tool. This works like a paintbrush, so we're going to change the size of our brush at the top to be about 50 or so pixels. This is a good size. When we zoom back out, this will allow us to click and drag around the hair and to pick up all these extra little bits and edges. We'll go to this side. Now, this would be very, very difficult to do if I used our regular traditional selection tools or even tried to paint this on. Instead, with a couple of clicks, you can see how it picks up on the contrast between these dark hairs and the light edge on the background and makes it a perfect selection. Let's scroll down to the bottom left corner and pick up these sticks as well. We're going to click and drag around. It may take multiple clicks and multiple passes, but eventually you'll be able to pick up all of the different details that are down here. Photoshop does a really good job of noticing the contrast between the areas that we want to select and to affect. All right, I'm going to hit Command and 0. This will bring us back to full mode. Some other ways you can refine the edge is by going to Edge Detection and playing around with this. You can also turn on the global refinement and play around with this. But to be honest, there's not too much changes that I want to make. Let's go to the output settings and make sure the output 2 is chosen as a layer mask. With layer mask selected, when we say OK at the very bottom, this is going to mask off the background of the skyline and just leave the figure that we have. Check out our layers panel too. This adds another little icon that will show you where things are masked off. Everything that's black you can see is now transparent, and everything that's white is still opaque and visible. Now, these pixels are not deleted. The best part about working with a layer mask is that you can undo any changes that you've done. As a matter of fact, the book is going to show you different things you can do with it. If you hold down the control panel, the control button, and click on the layer mask, you can disable this layer mask. You can see there's an X going through it, and it brings back all of the pixels that were masked off. If you hold down Control and choose Apply Layer Mask, now this will get rid of the layer mask, and it will actually delete away those pixels. Now, we usually don't want to do this. We want to work non-destructively. So I'm going to do Command Z to undo that. And let's hold down Control again, and let's re-enable the layer mask. With that done, we can go back up to File, and here's a good saving point. Now a layer mask acts as an alpha channel. Whenever you hear alpha, think of it as a transparency channel. You can see this channel by going to Window, and let's open up our Channels panel. I can see it off to the side here, next to my layers. And within this channel, you can see the sunrise mask. If we turn on visibility for it, you can see that it will give a red cast over everything that's been masked out. And if we double click on that, you can bring up the channel options, and let's make the opacity 100%. When we say OK, this will make it nice and red. You can edit your mask and further refine and actually mask off or unmask areas by painting black or white on top of it. Let's choose the paintbrush in our toolbox. The paintbrush looks like a regular paintbrush. And if we look at our options at the very top, let's set a paintbrush value size to be about 50 pixels tall. And we'll set the hardness value to be 100%. Everything else we'll keep at its default normal mode. Now check out our fill color. The topmost swatch is actually our foreground color, and this is the color that we're going to be painting on. The background color is set to white. Wherever we paint black, which is our foreground color, this will add on to the mask, and you can see it's adding on and putting red right where it needs to be. If we want to mask off another area, let's mask off this right-hand side. So click and drag and continue to refine the edge that you want and take out some of the background that we don't necessarily need. This may take multiple clicks to do, but we just want to refine both of the edges and paint black on top of it. Another way of working faster is just to make a larger brush. I'm going to hit Command and 0, and that'll back out. And once you're satisfied with what you got, let's go up to File and Save. A final way to edit a layer mask is by using our Properties panel. Let's go back to our channel layer and double click on the sunrise mask, and let's bring the opacity back down to about 50%. And we say OK, that'll put it back to normal. We can even click on the eyeball and turn it off altogether. Now that I have the sunrise layers layer mask selected, if we go up to our Properties panel, you can see that there's a little icon for the mask, and there's some options that allow us to change it up, particularly the density and the feathering of it. Let's set the feathering value, bring it all the way up to about 25 pixels. You can see when it does that, it makes the edge of it nice and soft. Now this can be pretty good for combining 2 or more layers, but for this it's a little bit too much. So let's bring the feathering back down to about 1 pixel. That's just enough to allow it to give a good contrast between this layer and the layers that are going to be below it. Again, let's go up to File and Save. And let's turn on some of the other layers. We'll go down to our tornado and turn that layer on, and the lightning layer and turn that one on. Now since these 2 layers are on top of our sunrise layer, we obviously can't see it. So click on the sunrise layer and drag up until it's right on top of the lightning layer. You should see a blue line just above it. With that done, now you can see that this layer looks like it's on top of all of the other ones. I'm going to drag my layers panel back over here just so we can get it out of the way and see everything else that we're working with. Now one issue I see is that at the very bottom left-hand corner there's a little bit of transparency peeking through. This is because my tornado layer is not large enough to be seen. So click on your tornado layer in your layers panel, do Command T to bring up the transform tool, and hold down the Shift key and drag it down to the left until it starts to fill up any transparent areas. You may have to do this on the right-hand side too, depending on how you masked off your area. Once you're done, you can hit the Return key and lock in that change. Now the lightning is a little bit too stark. I want to be able to see it, so let's drop its opacity. Go into your Layers panel, choose the lightning layer, and at the very top you'll see the opacity. If you highlight this number, you can drop the opacity down to 35 And now I can see just a little bit of the lightning, but I can also see the layer that's below it. The final thing we can do is turn back on visibility for our logo types. I'll hit Command 0 so I can see everything, and we're completely finished with this stage, and you can see that the main cover of the artwork has been completed. In the next stage, we're going to show you how to save it as multiple different file types so that it can be used for different sizes and different reasons.